Well, hello everybody. Hello, Bettina. How you doing?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. We took last week off because you had a major life event going on.
Major life event. Sounds so ominous.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a retirement party.
Yeah, retiring as a mother, maybe. I don't know. I That's kind of what it felt like for me. But yes, the second of the two children finally moved.
Oh shit, that slipped out, eh?
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the way it
Yeah,
is nowadays, though. I think
yeah, yeah,
kids stay home longer because it's harder to afford to move out, to be honest.
yeah. Yeah, and jobs and
And
careers start much later.
yeah, yeah, and people don't get paid all that great, and but the
In debt.
opportunity, yeah, the opportunity came up for Allison, so we moved her into her new digs on last Friday, which was pretty interesting. And yeah, it was a bit of an emotional. I was a bit weepy. I actually we took many cars and Peter's van, and we kind of moved everything in pretty much one go. But then we had Peter and I came home. I said, I'll take my car home. Peter can drive the van home, and we'll pick up a couple of bigger pieces of furniture. And we were driving back, and I said to Peter, I'm kind of weepy. And I think it's that whole idea of my job is done. My
Hmm.
job as a mother is done. And it's kind of a, and then you find yourself, thinking about how cute they were when they were little and how much fun you had with them. And it's kind of a bit of nostalgic uh, journey you take. But on the whole, it's been pretty interesting because, Peter and I have never really lived alone.
You guys are like teenagers.
So it's like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a big move for everybody. I mean, for Allison as well, getting used to not living with your parents is, I think, a big thing, no matter what age you are. So yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure.
she comes home at lunch and stuff from work, and it's almost like she's not gone.
Well, I mean, with your skill in the kitchen, I think if you were within a half hour of me, I'd stop in for lunch at work on lunch
Well,
hour.
thanks for that. Just call ahead though, right?
That's
Because
right. That's right. Reserve a seat.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you have that open table app where I can just reserve a seat online.
Yeah, exactly.
Fresh bread, yeah, vegetables, everything.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, I haven't been making bread lately because of my diet thing that I'm on.
Yeah.
So I've sort of been
Well,
staying away from all the good stuff.
but if you had paying customers,
Well, that would be different. I'd have a reason to live.
yeah, your house is empty. You'll do anything to have company now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's so many things to talk about as a result of this because this is I mean we laugh about it, but it is a major kind of life event, and in a way not only personally, and you look back up like your history as a family and your role as a mother, but also it's interesting now with so many families with marriages and second marriages. You and Peter and my father and stepmother, they come together quite quickly. Um, as opposed to like when you're in your 20s without kids, you kind of take a
Mhm.
little bit more time, even if you are in the church or whatever, you do
Yeah.
take more time. And now it's like you get together, and for some of the financial reasons you listed, I mean, living together is quick, but oftentimes you're blending families together and you're living with kids months into the relationship. And then, you get the kids out of the house, and then you have that time alone for the first time, but maybe a decade into the relationship. And that can be really interesting.
Yeah, and it's going to be a decade in a couple of weeks. So yeah, um, yeah, it is really interesting because it's a totally different dynamic, right? I mean, I was saying to Peter, it was just me and the kids for so long.
Hmm.
And then he came along, and then it was the four of us, and now it's the two of us. And so there's been so many different changes. And yeah, it kind of crosses your mind. It's like, well, how are we going to be just the two of us now without that other person? Because every person in the household affects the relationships of everybody else to some degree. So yeah, you kind of think, am I going to even like him?
I don't think it's going to be a problem with you too.
But those are the things that
Yeah.
cross your mind
Yeah.
because especially when you haven't, like you said, started from scratch and had that time alone and got to be together by yourselves and stuff like that. So I think those are things that do cross your mind. No, I don't think it's going to be a problem for us, but again, I'm not saying it didn't cross my mind, and
Yeah,
probably crossed his too.
for
You
sure.
know
Yeah.
that
You know,
that being that being said, he stopped on his way. He stopped at her place on his way home last night to fix her toilet. And I think he's stopping there tonight to fix her faucet. So it's very cute.
yeah, that's nice.
He says, well,
Yeah.
I tried to look and see if it was something I could fix, but it's not.
Yeah,
So
it does help. It's a wonderful thing to have a father figure who can fix things around the house if and save you that pain of trying to figure it out on your own. That's really
yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's definitely a bonus.
Yeah, yeah, big bonus.
But then he'll
Um,
show her and she'll learn, and
yeah, yeah,
she's spent enough time around me doing things myself that she doesn't have a problem trying to figure it out.
yeah. Yeah, it's almost like, when you talk about the house and having multiple people in it, it's almost like the Enneagram chart over your right shoulder in a way where, there as people move out of the house and or you add people, it is funny how there's almost lines drawn between everybody and how the proper balance and the routines and you find you settle into your healthy, comfortable space with everybody. And then when one gets removed, there is a rebalancing for sure. And it's almost important that those things be talked about and almost negotiated and what are we going to do with these extra hours and these less commitments or these more commitments and less hours.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great because I feel a sense of freedom. Um, why do I feel a sense of freedom? I can make dinner when I want. Like, I mean, when you have extra people in the house, you do feel like you need to keep to a bit of a schedule
Right.
for
The
all the
expectation.
people involved.
Yeah.
But now it's like,
Predictability.
I know Peter's pretty easygoing about stuff like that, so it's no big deal. Um, Also, just little things like um, Allison and I have always had this system. I leave the hall light on at night, and then when she comes home, she turns it off. And if I wake up in the night, I just have to look and see the lights not shining through the door, and I know she's home.
Yeah.
And so just remembering to turn off the hall light when we go to bed because we don't have to do that anymore. Those kind of things, things you don't think of, but things that are kind of, you get kind of sentimental over them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That almost takes us into where we want to talk. And it is funny when how you kind of regain freedom, through this transition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know that what we wanted to talk about today was a little bit about crying and its role and its healthy role in a life. And I was thinking about, I can imagine one morning with you being an emotional woman, that you could wake up in the middle of the night and see that you left that light on just by habit, and you wake up and it's like 4 in the morning and the light's still on. Those are the kind of things that when you're in a good place can instantly trigger an emotional response, and how beautiful it can be and how beautiful crying can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't have a problem crying. Although my kids have a problem with me crying. They don't like to see me cry.
Hmm.
They make fun of it actually. Because when we on moving day, we went out, the four of us went out for a late lunch after we were done. And I don't know what they were talking about. Well, I don't know. We all had drinks, and Stephen and Allison, because Allison and Stephen are now living together. Stephen and his girlfriend and Allison are all living in the same house. So I went, so I picked up my glass and I went, good luck, good luck. And then I don't know how the conversation got. And then I could feel myself getting a little emotional, and both of them are saying, oh, yeah, she's going to cry. She's going to cry. She's going to cry. And I'm like, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. So I do tend to sort of, they're probably the ones that I most would hold back, just because they'll laugh at me, you know? And I know it's their own sort of being uncomfortable with it, but I don't want to be laughed at when I'm crying, because it just makes it worse. But I think, to get more serious about it, I think that there's an importance to being able to cry. And I think it has to do with letting go. I think it's a really important step in letting go and releasing. If there's an inability to cry at appropriate times, I think it's just an indication that we're still holding on to things that we don't want to look at or deal with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be a problem, because then we're not being emotionally healthy. We're not letting go of the things and recognizing and being aware of the things that we're feeling that really need to be addressed and really need to be acknowledged. And I think we really need to be with those moments when we cry, and forget about this, stiff upper lip and, buck up, buddy, or whatever it is, especially men, because men have a harder time with it because of the way they've been raised, because of the way society is and has been. Now, I think it's changing, but there's a lot of women too who they don't cry. They don't want to cry. They don't want to seem it. People see it as a sign of vulnerability, of weakness, and I believe it's a strength. I believe to acknowledge and to feel and to express your vulnerability is a strength. I've always said that, because I think it takes great courage to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking at it as a weakness is really harmful to us when we look at it as a weakness, because then we are afraid to express it,
Yeah.
and then we don't cry. And tears are very cleansing as well. I read something long time ago, so I can't really quote it, but I read something about the makeup of tears is different for the different reasons that you're crying.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're crying because you're sad, those tears will be different. They'll have a different chemical makeup than tears of grief, or tears of happiness, or whatever it is. They all have their own sort of physical makeup, which I find very interesting, because I think it can relate back to the the water crystals. What's that guy's name? Japanese guy who did the water crystals and put a motto or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he took the water crystals and he put different emotions, impressed different emotions on them, and then did them under a microscope, and they were all different shapes, and the molecules were all different. The ones that were all the positive emotions were beautifully formed and looked really lovely, and the ones that had the negative emotions impressed upon them were distorted and kind of misshapen. And it's really interesting. And I think that's, it's the same. It's like, well, when you talk to your plants, everything has an energy, like you said. And I think our tears carry that energy as well. And so they can actually be a good way to release different energies, lower energies that we're holding on to.
Yeah. You know, it's always been something that I've been so fascinated with feminine energy. And it's always been such an attraction to girls for me as a guy. Was is that that strength in emotion. And I have actually have a quote about crying doesn't just liberate you; it liberates everybody around you too.
Mhm.
And one of the places where I think it's like really healthy for feminine energy to lead is emotionally. And when you can cry, and which doesn't mean that men shouldn't cry or men can't lead in that way too, but I think it's really healthy. It's a really healthy in a dynamic, in a group, in a one-on-one relationship, or even your relationship with yourself. Is that when you're crying, you're opening something up, like you said, that you're opening something up, you're being vulnerable, you're calling attention to something um, that can be beautiful, that can be painful, that can be sorrowful, whatever. Um, and I like when you say that you've never had a problem with it and you open up freely like that. I think one of the greatest things that men can do to bring more of that into the world is create an environment with their woman so that they do feel always comfortable and able and accepted and protected and safe when it's time to cry and when it's time to bring attention to the issues that are leading to crying, and they can be incredibly healing, not only for the person who's crying, but for the situation around them. And I think women are even better, are incredible at this too, as knowing the energy in a group, knowing an energy in a relationship, and trusting that intuition. You know, people talk all the time about women's intuition, but it goes this way too. That when it's time to cry, it's time to talk and explore and evaluate and examine something very important that's going on. That you almost need to trust her leadership in this way emotionally, where in some other ways men can be better at handling leadership in some other facets of life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, differences between male and masculine and feminine energy, and they all have their place and time. Um, and I think that's the beautifully balanced relationship is when the masculine and feminine energy is used at the appropriate times, and it just becomes this beautiful flow of, okay, right now we need a little bit more masculine in there. We need some leadership. We need some courage. We need some, we need to have a voice. We need to be a little bit more assertive. Uh, or, right now we need to be vulnerable. We need to, I think vulnerability is such a key to really deep communication, because
Yes.
when you finally express that vulnerability, you're ready to connect with someone on a really deep level. And that to me is like this
Mhm.
perfect little gem. But it does take, that more feminine energy. And I don't think we need to be afraid of either if they're used in the right context and in the appropriate situation. When it's taken too far one way or the other, then definitely that needs to be examined. But I think in their in their perfection and used in that wonderful balance that can happen between two people, I think it's really the basis of a good solid relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've referenced many times on this show about how that vulnerability, that cracking open, is the space where you're going to feel just the most free love exchange between two people if you can honor the energy of the one who's crying. Um, it's incredible. It almost reminds me of like internet cable 15 years ago and internet cable today. Just the amount of connection that can trade between two people when you can honor a crying energy and what the crying is pointing at, and almost to your example earlier about yeah, you're in a public place with family dynamic and at a restaurant, and the waiter might be coming over, and so like, yeah, you tearing up, but really you're just calling attention to the beauty of the family and of the time spent together and the times ahead and the changing dynamics and the love to support all one another and to even go out and celebrate a meal together at this big life event. I mean, there's a lot of beauty there to be recognized. And I think every time, I know society encourages us not to cry, and I know that, sometimes men sometimes call it the trump card of like, oh gosh, don't cry, but um,
Don't play
it's
the
it's
card.
it's the
Yeah.
best. It's the best. It's the woman's trump card, right? The crying, but
Yeah.
that really doesn't do it service. And I think men should be challenged to uh, see what that is really communicating, and if you can, you'll be rewarded very handsomely.
Yeah. Again, I mean, there's always abuse of the system, so to speak.
Sure, it
So
can be
yeah,
manipulated. Yeah,
of course it can. But then where does that get you in a relationship if that's
right.
how you're playing it, right?
Hmm, hmm.
Um, it's interesting because while you were saying that about being in the restaurant, something else hit me was the feeling was my family's never going to be the same again,
That's right.
in a certain way. And that's kind of, wow, that's big, you know?
Yeah,
So, but yeah, um, I think if it had been a strong enough emotion, I probably would have cried anyway,
yeah,
even if even being in that restaurant, it would not have stopped me.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
I
just,
remember. Oh,
it's just become so important to me over the years. I mean, being a five who's the thinker, with a four wing who's a feeler, I've really learned to rely on that four part of me to guide me into my emotions rather than the five that just wants to analyze them and never get any farther ahead. Um, yeah, I've really learned to sort of shift that perspective and embrace the fourness where the emotions come very freely. So
yeah.
um, I think it's important. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I was going to say that I remember back, my grandmother on my dad's side, she um, passed when I was 13, but and she just lived for like acts of service. She was always giving of herself and loved to have the family over on Sunday and cook incredible meals for everybody. But she would cry at the drop of a hat. And she was always crying, and I'm sure she cried lots of times for sadness and sorrow and so on. But the amount of times when I was a child, I saw her cry out of happiness. We'd be sitting at the, we'd all sit down and they'd say their grace, and then you'd be scarfing all the food onto your plate, all the great salads and pastas and veal and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, and then you'd look over and like grandma would had her head in her hands and she was like bawling, she was just so happy.
My family, look at my family enjoying themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made an impression on me as like a tender 6-year old toddler boy, about um, what it was to be emotional, and not really like,
And
to me it was
how,
beautiful, but I didn't get it, at the time. But that she could do it with such frequency was always so beautiful to me.
I think it's interesting that you still remember that about her.
Right.
Because, like, what kind of impression would it make on a 6-year-old?
Yeah. 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 And people would honor it, but they'd also be like, "Oh, come on, it's a happy time," like,
It's like,
"Come on,
oh, there
enjoy,
goes
enjoy,
grandma.
enjoy," you know.
Yeah. It's
You
like,
know?
oh, yeah.
Like,
Like, oh, grandma's crying again.
that's right, eh? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it is funny, and I think
I
and there was nothing. It's not a criticism, but I do think that if we
No.
can really encourage that, I mean, we can see more beauty in the world.
And honor it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Honor those emotions, any emotion. Um, just not dismiss it so easily. And I think that's what we do. And I think that's how we raise our kids. It's like, if they're crying, the first thing we say is, what's wrong?
Hmm.
I've really worked hard at changing that.
That's interesting. It already gives it a negative charge. What's wrong?
Yeah. Oh, there must be something wrong. I'm crying, right?
That's right.
And then we say, oh, stop it. You don't cry,
Yeah.
right? Don't cry. Here, have
Mhm.
something to eat, or
That's right.
here, go play with this toy, or that's how addictions are formed. Because no, I really,
Yeah.
seriously, you
Yeah.
laugh, but I think that's really a big part of it, because
No, because
we learn to stuff our feelings
hmm
and fill that void with something else: food,
yeah.
toys, whatever. Whatever we see other people doing that looks like it might be fun, alcohol, drugs, whatever. I think that really does. So I think if my kids were small now, I would just if they're having a temper tantrum, I'd just let them have it. It's like, yeah, you need to go in your room and get it all out, but yeah, just don't take it out on me, right?
Yeah.
Draw that line, but don't dismiss the emotions, because I think that's where we learn it's not good to cry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
It's a difficult thing to manage, but you're absolutely right. We do certainly try to shut it up as soon as possible. You know, it is a difficult job as a parent to see when they're using it for manipulation and when they're not really hurt. And kids are it's an
yeah,
absolute wreck. So, but you're absolutely right. Those messages that we send early, yeah, it's a real challenge for all of us to help the next generation be more in tune and to be able to decide for themselves what feels right rather than stuffing things down. And I don't think you have to look
yeah,
too much further than the statistics on drugs and alcohol abuse in Western culture in 2018 to see that we haven't done a good job.
yeah, yeah, for sure. um it's a big problem.
It's a huge problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's one of the reasons. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, we've used up half
I
the
don't even want to
half
go
the.
into that.
I know, right? That's
I mean, it's
yeah,
like all these things going on in my mind. I'm like, no, I think I'll just let that sit.
yeah. Well, we have lots of shows in the future to talk about these things, and we will. But how do you feel about finishing us off with a meditation to start our day?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Let's close our eyes. Take a deep breath. And as you breathe, allow yourself to move into that space within you where you feel a sense of freedom, where you feel a sense of safety, where you feel safe to feel sad or happy, to feel angry, to feel worried, upset, to feel love, to feel joy. In this space, it can flow in whatever way it needs to flow. And we can step out of the way and allow that flow to come. And if that flow, happy or sad, comes in the form of tears, allow that cleansing to happen, because it is in this admission of vulnerability, this moment of truth, where we are set free, where we recognize that this feeling that we have, this thought that we are looking at, is not who we are, but an experience that we're having, and that we can stand in the center of all our life experiences and allow them to come and go, to flow as they may, to feel how that experience touches us, and to not be tethered down by the feelings because we're holding back, because we're holding on to them, because we're collecting our emotions and saving them. because that storage locker will become full. And when it becomes full and we try to fill it again, it will burst forth, and everything with an intensity beyond control will burst out of it. And all that we have felt will come forth. So allow the flow. Picture your emotions like a river flowing, constant movement, acknowledging, allowing them to be let go and to be released until the next emotion comes. This is your freedom, this is your truth, and this is your peace. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
Thank you, Bettina.
You're welcome.
You know, it reminded me, like in a book that I just recently read, there's a phrase from it. It says that chances are the less you're crying, the unhappier you are. It's kind of a way to turn it upside down. Like you say, keep that river flowing,
Yeah.
Of course, be socially appropriate, but, first chance you get, let things out, talk about them, communicate verbally or emotionally or otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week, and we'll see you all again next.
Have a great week, everyone.